Hello and welcome to our second web chat on virtual accounts and how to fully exploit the technology. We have Dirk Kronshage, Global Head of Collections, Cash Products from Deutsche Bank, who's 20 years plus experience in transaction banking in EMEA and the APAC region. Welcome, Dirk.
Hi, Jack. Happy to be here.
Well, your first web chat was very successful. It's been viewed thousands of times and has clearly been a framework for people to try and understand the topic. Now, you're going to build on that web chat and give practical advice on how virtual accounts can be used in corporate treasury centralization and the role of technology in virtual account solutions. Your first slide neatly covers how VA can be used in solutions in treasury centralization. Can you talk us through this?
Absolutely, more than happy to, Jack. What we find in client conversations time and again is that sometimes virtual account solutions are seen as an end in itself. However, the way how we are looking at them and how a number of corporates are increasingly assessing them is that these virtual account solutions are actually to be seen as a means towards an end. And the end is mostly a centralization effort that happens in corporate treasury and which can come in different shapes and forms. If we could take a look at this visualization that we have prepared. So what we are trying to depict here and what we would like to propose how your viewers and readers should think about the usage of virtual accounts is that they could play a role in a treasury journey, a corporate treasury journey, that is. The starting point for corporates to look into the potential of how virtual accounts can actually help them achieve their broader treasury objectives is very often what we have depicted here on the left-hand side. It starts with bank account rationalization. That is the question how the usage of virtual account solutions can actually facilitate the central processing of both payments and receipts. Now, those corporates that have done that, they have almost immediately, as a side benefit, created significant benefits for them in the space of liquidity management or cash concentration. And it may seem very obvious that fewer accounts means the corporate's cash flow is flowing through fewer accounts than may have been the case before. But at the end of the day, what this leads to is that it's a consolidation of liquidity positions across subsidiaries, countries, and currencies. Taking this thought one step further, if the underlying corporate is doing that not just in a singular market or for a singular currency, but instead across the core functional currencies of the organization, the initially created streamlined bank account structure can also provide distinct benefits around managing and centralizing foreign exchange exposures. And if we were to extend this thought a step further, i.e. looking at what we are actually covering here, we talk about the centralized handling of payment and receipts. We talk about the consolidated handling of liquidity. We look at how this could be leveraged towards handling and managing foreign exchange exposures that exist within the organization. On aggregate, these are activities which are typically performed by a corporate in-house bank, i.e. we look at how we can centralize the operating model for a given company's treasury organization.
Is there a difference between the old in-house bank and the new virtual one, or is the new virtual one just a more efficient way of doing it?
That's a great question, Jack. I think what I would like to say here is that the term in-house bank for a lot of corporates that we speak to tends to be associated with significant investments into technology. It is associated with significant integration and implementation efforts. What we are seeing, though, and what we would like to propose as a thought here really, is that the availability and increasing usage of modern day treasury technology, such as virtual ledger management, does actually empower the corporate to potentially use these technologies for achieving exactly what an in-house bank does. However, it could be achieved at lower, significantly lower at times, cost than what the traditional in-house bank, as it were, would have incurred for the organization.
Yeah, this is an attractive proposition. Let's have a look at the technology and the role of technology in virtual account solutions. Can you talk us through this?
No, absolutely. What we find in client conversations when we speak to corporates is that the role of treasury technology tends to get underestimated and also overlooked in many cases. Now, why is this relevant? This is relevant because what we are recommending and advocating to the corporates that we are speaking to is that it's very crucial and critical to really take stock of the as-is situation before you can define the to-be target state for your treasury organization. Let's take a look at a couple of examples that are supposed to illustrate this point in a bit greater detail. What we are trying to depict here is a structure that we do find quite often with corporates that we are speaking to, meaning to say that the finance and accounting activities and also the responsibilities can be spread across the corporate organization. Now, let me talk about that in a bit greater detail. What we are trying to show here is a combination of different structures that we more often than not find within one and the same company, actually. On the left-hand side, we have depicted a decentral allocation of cash management responsibilities, meaning at a subsidiary level. Sometimes these subsidiaries may share a common ERP. Then there may be other subsidiaries which have their cash management activities consolidated into a shared service unit for some, but not necessarily for all of the subsidiaries. And lastly, we have then fully autonomous subsidiaries, which are characterized by mostly decentral responsibilities and then also using standalone ERP systems. This is something which we find very often, by the way, when there is an awful lot of acquisitions going on at a corporate level. So in summary, if you were to look at it from the perspective of what are the characteristics of the bank account structure, of the organizational model and the technology that is used, it tends to be, in this example, very heterogeneous and decentralized. By comparison, if we look at the right-hand side, and honestly speaking, this is not a common structure, but we do see that this is in place with an increasing number of corporates, where cash management activities are handled by a shared service function for many subsidiaries, for as many as possible, in fact, using a common ERP. Now, this can obviously facilitate the implementation of a virtual account structure immensely, yet we find this to be, as I said earlier, still to be more the exception than the norm. Now, this is a broad distinction between the two common scenarios that we do see with corporates that we are speaking to. Let's now take this a step further and examine how does the introduction and usage of virtual account numbers actually help change that picture. We have taken the centralized example from the previous slide, and what we have added now here on the right-hand side is a target structure where we are, for simplicity's sake, operating with a single bank account only. This single bank account has a set of virtual account numbers attached to it. Now, we are using those, obviously, in order to facilitate payment processing. So this is exactly where the usage of virtual ledger management technology comes into play. Simply put, virtual ledger management tools can help with the following, if we follow this slide or this illustration from the top to the bottom. Firstly, to reconcile the bank account statement. The usage of virtual account numbers in this example to facilitate transaction processing enables then the corporate to unanimously segregate transactions by entity or subsidiary. As a result, there can then be one account statement per virtual account number, which is then, and now we're talking about the middle part, passed on to the shared service unit, and it's the shared service unit which would process these bank account statements at the level of the individual virtual account numbers for reconciliation purposes. Similarly, it is also the shared service center unit which would generate payment files for subsequent execution out of a central treasury account, which is what we have depicted in the top of this chart. And at the bottom, and certainly not least relevant, all of these activities and ultimately transactions are then being fed back to the general ledger in order to ensure that the appropriate recordings and postings can be done. So in a nutshell, virtual ledger management tools, what they do is to facilitate the handling of all bank account activity. They support the internal reporting and accounting as well. The fundamental difference for most corporates is that by using virtual accounts, this can be accomplished with significantly fewer external bank accounts, thereby creating immediate benefits such as liquidity consolidation and providing further optionality for future consolidation. This is what we essentially had talked about.
Okay, so the overall benefit are these 2 points at the bottom, isn't it?
Exactly right. So a streamlined ERP infrastructure obviously reduces the implementation and effort significantly, but what also must not be overlooked is that the moment you are centralizing accounting and payments related activities into a single unit within the organization, this will greatly benefit from operating off a more harmonized and consistent process framework. The shared service centers are obviously a prime location within the respective client organization to domicile these activities, yet we do not always see this to be the case.
So the question then becomes, well, how do I implement this? And you've got a series of questions here. Which structure would be right for me, assuming I'm a corporate treasurer or a finance director?
I think the fundamental starting point is to be clear about your primary objective that you want to achieve as a treasurer. Is it about facilitating reconciliation? Because that is one of the very initial benefits of virtual account solutions when they got introduced in the marketplace around the second part of the last decade, I would. Increasingly so, especially in the EMEA and US regions, we do see that corporates, however, are assessing or want to pursue the implementation of virtual account solutions as a means to rationalize bank accounts. So it's something that is high on the corporate treasurer's agenda. Then there are others where we see that they are looking at the creation and implementation of virtual account solutions as a means to enhance their existing liquidity management, or more broadly speaking, enhance working capital management. Simply put, to expedite payables processing, to expedite the allocation of receivables or receipts to the ledger. Now, to be clear, and for the avoidance of doubt, this is not about defining and singling out a single objective. It may well be that there is a set of short to medium to longer term treasury objectives. And that's the advice that we keep on giving, and which we also outlined in the beginning, that as a treasurer, you ideally look at and have a well-defined landing point. Where would you want to end up in a few years from now? And how can the utilization and implementation of a virtual account structure today help you or contribute towards achieving that objective over the medium term?
And that's exactly right. That's the question, really. So the second question would be, what is the right number and location for the remaining physical accounts? That's quite a problem, isn't it?
It is indeed. And what I would like to say is that if we were to reflect on the client conversations that we are having, there is no universally applicable answer. We do hear and read about talk in the marketplace that one bank account is the penultimate objective. However, we need to be mindful in context of a globally operating multinational corporate. This is an unrealistic target, very simply and honestly put. We have to be mindful of the fact that, especially in the less developed or emerging markets, there can be a broad range of regulations that are outright hindering or making impossible the implementation of these structures. These could be regulations in the space of foreign exchange restrictions, the free flow of foreign currency across borders. There may well be restrictions in regards to intercompany borrowing and lending and so forth. But in practical terms, and as a specific answer to your question, Jack, what I would like to say is that what we most commonly find is that corporates are looking at, especially the multinational corporates, they are looking at the key regional treasury hubs that they may have for the Americas, EMEA, and APAC regions, and explore ways of leveraging the infrastructure that they tend to have already in those locations as a means towards then rationalizing bank accounts further, consolidating cash flows, and manage the liquidity and FX exposures.
So the answer really is there is no right number. It's the number that's appropriate to your situation.
Exactly right.
Okay, moving on and looking at your third question, how to orchestrate the change vis-a-vis your end customers in the most effective and seamless manner. Introduction of virtual account numbering can be quite a problem.
That's a very valid question, and I would like to break this down into two phases, namely before go live and after go live. The number one advice that we are giving to customers before they are actually introducing and rolling out virtual account solutions is to be as clear and transparent as they possibly can be about what will change. And change will happen on two fronts in all probability. It will happen vis-a-vis your vendors and how you pay your vendors, and it also, and most visibly, will impact how you are collecting from your customers going forward, and where that change will be. As sad as it is, we need to be mindful, especially in a corporate context, that changing standard settlement instructions or changing bank account details is a very sensitive topic for corporates these days, and the rigidity and the intensity with which the controls have been intensified over previous years, which are making it literally imperative to be very, very clear about what is changing as and when you as a corporate are introducing virtual account solutions, when you are consolidating payment and receivables activities across the organization. So much about what to be mindful of before you go live. If we look at the post-go live activities, the most successful implementations that we have seen are those where the customer has made it a conscious effort to put in place a change management organization that does ensure that post-go live, the intended consolidation of transactions, the intended consolidation of cash flow does indeed happen as envisaged and in the shortest possible time frame. So simply put, the advice that we are giving here is that corporates should allocate sufficient resources also for the go live phase in order to make sure that the transition can work as smooth and as quickly as it possibly can.
Good advice. How do you make affiliated group companies bank account free? Is that reality?
I think it's both a myth or can be a myth and reality. So I think you need to be realistic about external limitations, meaning to say that there's an awful lot of things that are possible by using technology, but we have to be mindful of the environment that we are operating in. So I spoke earlier about regulations that may exist. What we do see is that those customers who have implemented these solutions, they are getting about 35 to 40% reduction in bank accounts, I would say. For a multinational corporate, this number or this percentage can easily translate into a couple of hundred bank accounts less that they would maintain going forward compared to the pre-implementation scenario. So it can be done, but there are some limitations that one needs to be mindful of. Those customers who have gone down that path, they have definitely seen significant benefits in that order of magnitude that I've just mentioned.
This is exciting technology, but to really exploit it, what does the corporate treasurer have to ask themselves? What's the key question?
I would say the key question is twofold. Number one, be clear about what you want to achieve over the medium term for your treasury as a whole, and then examine the role that virtual account solutions as an enabler for a lot of centralization efforts can play in that regard. So it's the planning stage, if you will, at the outset that should not be underestimated. The second point that I would like to add is the fact that some customers have already certain technology in place within the organization, which they could exploit, which they could leverage in order to facilitate the introduction of virtual account solutions. In different words, rolling out a virtual account solution does not always and does not necessarily dictate the use of additional and new technology, which tends to come at additional integration and implementation efforts. Very plainly put, the advice that we would give to corporates is really to see what is it that you have which you could potentially leverage. Treasury management systems are a case in point. We do see that they provide a lot of functionality that could be leveraged here. Then there are other corporates which already have or are contemplating to get in-house bank solutions in place from the ERP providers. There may well be distinct benefits and advantages to do so. But then there are also corporates who do not fit in either of these camps. And those customers would then look towards their banking partner to provide a technology solution that can help them reap the benefits without having to incur the significant investment and implementation effort. And that is the proverbial virtual in-house bank that I was talking about in the beginning.
Thank you, Dirk. Very, very interesting.
Thanks very much, Jack.